Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of VNture podcast, your weekly podcast all about the world of visual novels. Today, we once again have an honored guest with us. Now it's Ange time. And he has been an amazing content creator throughout the years, and we are super glad to have him for another week. And here he is for a quick self-introduction to anyone who missed last week's episode.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, this is Ange, as Toro said. I am a visual novel YouTube content creator, and I mostly focus on talking about visual novel news and kind of sharing what happened in the previous month so people can kind of keep up every month. Otherwise, I'm here to just celebrate. I'm excited to be back to celebrate the new year with this new topic that MR is going to introduce to us.
Yes, I can't wait to start with Moega. But let's first go for the definition using VNDP. So, Moega, short for Moege, usually have very characteristic style of drawing with vivid colors and cheerful childlike heroines with big eyes. Popular examples of Moege are Da Capo and Shuffle. With that definition in mind, Ange, what are your thoughts?
Oh boy. Yeah. I get this based on purely on this definition of moege. It's funny that they have to specifically say moe, which is kind of like a funny catch-all term to define cute or cutesy, as they say. And moe's kind of subjective by the person, but generally that defines like a brighter, soft. I guess, yeah, brighter, softer art style. Nothing too fancy there. It's funny that they talk about childlike heroines with big eyes, because that seems like a kind of a little too stereotypical on certain developers, in my opinion. And I would personally not say all heroines are childlike, but I mean, some are, but there's definitely some mature ones in there. But overall, I guess technically the description isn't wrong per se. It's just, I think there's just a few details I'd personally add. Like, for example, this definition didn't bring up that moege tend to be very slice of life heavy. So a lot of, usually vast majority of them are in high school. It usually starts with the main character, either a transfer student, or it's his first day in school, or there's a transfer student heroine, stuff like that. And then there's like the different archetype, like the different common archetypes and all that stuff.
I wonder if it comes to Moega again. I want to hear your definition. How do you feel about, because I found that often about Moege, people tend to say they are safe, meaning you kind of know what you're getting into, and there's certain expectation of themes in those kind of titles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So while moege do have little differences here and there, it's like you said, many of them are what you would call safe, in that there's certain formulas they tend to fall on that I think a lot of people expect. So, like I said earlier, usually it's in high school. There's a little bit of you introduce to the heroines, and many of them have some degree of like stereotypical personalities, like tsundere, genki girl, kudere, one-san, etc. You're not going to find all the archetypes in every VN. There's going to be variations of what appear, but I think if you've been around the block as far as slice of life anime or harem anime, I think if you were to read a moege, you'd kind of feel right at home. And usually with these, going back into the whole safe thing, or the formulas, usually after you get into the heroines, you have like the common route where it's mostly just slice of life, getting to know the heroines, maybe some gag humor if they have some. then eventually you get the choices, and then once you get to a route, it's almost always just about how does the main character properly romance X character? Like, what are like some like the like how do they make their relationship more romantic? All that stuff. Then they get into the H scenes, and then there's more romantic stuff, then more H scenes, then yeah, that I think a lot of people expect that, and that's in a weird way why it's popular. It's like there's usually no like plot twist, like for the most part no one's just gonna die, or there's not gonna be like, I don't know, something really like no like big action scenes or big mystery or stuff like that. It's usually pure slice of life romance all the way through.
Okay.
I
On
like,
that note,
yeah, I wanted to add, Mr. Hold up, that before we move on from that whole safe topic, is that reminded me of a similar example with Hallmark movies. They're very formulaic. The characters are generally pretty standard throughout each of them, and they're best used as comfort food, where the watchers know the general pacing of how it's going to play out, and the characters involved, and the lighthearted romance involved as well. And so that's usually its appeal, right? In which the readers know what they're getting, and they know it'll just be some wholesome, heartwarming, daily normal life material, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess as a Moege fan myself, I definitely go in these. It's like I said, it's like comfort food. Like, as long as I know that it has like certain archetypes that I like, or as a certain type of humor style, like I'm pretty much gonna go and just sit back, relax, and just have a good time. No random unexpected plot twists or anything dark. Just there to just have a comfortable and simple time.
On that note, I have a question, because when you were describing your definition of moega, especially the emphasis on routes, relationship, romance, how much of reality plays a role in moega? Or more specifically, example, is Nekopara a moega?
Ooh boy. I don't think Moege necessarily has to be like all realistic characters. I think part of the idea, which now I think about it, I haven't brought up yet, is it's like the wish fulfillment part of it. So in a way, Moege fully emphasizes the kind of, man, I wish I had this in my life, but I can't. And for some people, it could just be like, realistic-ish human girls with personalities you may find. But, like you said, Nekopara, some people, cat girls are a popular type of character in anime, manga, visual novels. Unless science advances really quickly or something, we're most likely not going to have cat girls in real life. So with Moege, which I guess is, by the way, I would consider Nekopara Moege, by the way. I would definitely say that fulfills the I guess you might call an odd wish fulfillment of, hey, what if I wanted to romance a cat girl? That can certainly be part of it. Doesn't have to be a realistic girl, like I said.
Neat. And so, you've covered some of the most common aspects of it, Moege. And so, what's one, go-to that you might consider right off the bat for a quick example of the most stereotypical kind of Moege?
Sure. I had to think about this for a little bit, but I would say this goes back to one of the first Moeges I read in my visual novel reading career, which is Princess Evangile, released by Moonstone. The main reason that one comes to mind in particular is because, outside the high school setting, being in a all-girls rich school, it has basically like every wish fulfillment slice of life romance you can think of. You're just some regular guy, main character. As the main character, you get sucked by all these very beautiful girls, normal girls. They got various different common type of personality types. Like you have a childhood friend who's kind of tsundere. You kind of have like a shy girl who's like a little kurere. You have like the kind of teasy one-san, etc. The common route does, I guess, have kind of sort of a plot where the main character has to kind of help the main girl Rise make the school more co-ed, but like all the girls, or a lot of the girls, are kind of I guess kind of afraid, or at least hesitant to just have a guy in their school, because it's a first for them. And and Rise is kind of like trying to force them to, or convince them to make the school co-ed being okay. But you get into a lot of like the very typical harem anime romance tropes where like the main character, like you might have like those moments in the story where like the main character might walk into a girl while she's changing, and then you get like a picture or a CG where the heroine is like has almost all her clothes off, and then she smacks the main character for not knocking on the door like a regular person would, and then he get beat up for that. But then you get a lot of like some romantic build up between all, at least in the first game, all four of the main heroines, and you kind of get like an idea of, okay, I'll talk to these four girls, and as I'm going along later on I can figure out who do I want to romance first. And then once you reach the common route, or sorry, the end of the common route, that's when you can kind of choose who to romance. And then each of the four heroines have stories that are basically completely romance oriented. Like, so maybe their backstories might play a little bit into their development, but it's kind of just, okay, what's the how would this main character feasibly romance the heroine you chose? And then you'll get to see them. You'll slowly get more romantic dialogue and kissing and H scenes and all that good stuff. And this whole time, I would say 90% of the visual novels lighthearted, kind of comedic, no like real dangerous drama or anything, or nothing life-threatening. It's a pure moe, relies on the stereotypes, relies on the romance, relies on the slice of life.
Ooh, wow. Yeah, that is quite a summary.
Yeah.
And like you said, it usually, there's, to tie in with what MR said about being realistic, there's some amount of anime shenanigans that isn't really a mainstay in the real world, but like you get a whole bunch of girls fawning over the main character, and of course there's usually the common scenes of the main character walking in on some of the girls changing, and they slap him, call him baka and a pervert. So, but yeah, it ties more into the whole wish fulfillment thing of kind of living out the happiest ideal of a high school life. Would you say?
Oh, absolutely. One thing that is, I think some people, like Japanese creators, kind of admit. Apparently, a big reason why a lot of anime and visual novels take place in high school is because a lot of these Japanese workers consider high school like the peak of their life, because you're kind of forced to interact with people. That's when it'd be a good time to like figure out, like, that's when like your hormones are raging. That's when like you're trying to figure out if you can get into relationships. So, and usually after they graduate from high school, that's when they like have to get a job, like have those wage jobs, or maybe they go to college, but most of the time they grant to a job. So I think a lot of times why the high school wish fulfillment kind of takes into place, because for some people, like for the readers, it's kind of these visual novels are meant to be read by people 18 or older, according to the beginning screens. But if you're in school, say you're reading an all ages version, it's just like, oh, when I'm going to school, if I had like my ideal school life, a romantic school, I would want to like I would like to have a situation, if not similar to this, like it can make the imagination roll. Like, man, it would be nice if I can go to this school, go out with this girl, at least give her a chance. All that stuff like that. That I would definitely say that's where the wish fulfillment would come in, as far as quote unquote realism would play in.
It's very interesting listening to your description of Princess Evangile, because for me, and again, maybe this showcases me not being particularly Moege connoisseur, but I remember specifically and vividly how interesting the topic of proving oneself, changing the direction of traditional school. That one that was all girls into the co-ed, that was the subplot, like you mentioned, of the common round. But the other part was constantly protagonist has to earn the trust of the school board, which was the antagonist of the common road, the principal.
Mm-hmm.
And one specific moment I remember shown pure terror when, despite all the talk about nurture, there was a male nature that triggered when there was a danger on the ground. And if you remember that scene, there was an intruder and he went ahead to defend the girls, right? But the way he did it and the way he approached the situation was so much more brutal than they were used to. And that felt like, contrasted with the safeness of the rest of the experience.
Yeah, that is a good point. Evangile did have some. I guess the protagonist had some moments like that where he definitely went a little bit above beyond like the usual plain nice guy protagonist into like a surprising amount of violence. But yeah, it was very rare, but it was like one of the few, I guess you can call, shocker moments that made it not just a pure romantic experience, I guess.
The other moment I remember, again on the same vein of proving yourself, it was one of the side characters, Konomi, that was very antagonistic against protagonist. On every step she wanted to denounce him and prove that he's lecherous by nature, right? And one particular event was a overnight adventure they spent together, and he, like kind of in a samurai code, promised himself not to harm her, and that was when he can tame his nature again, with the dilemma of nature versus nurture. So, I mean, those two moments I remember vividly from that title.
Oh yeah, I liked that Konomi moment as well. It was a good way for her to at least make her reconsider her opinion, and did provide a little bit of character development. So even though we talked about wish fulfillment, it's not like all the girls were like instantly in love with the protagonist and want in his pants and all that stuff. Like there's some that have to come a little bit, but yeah, it's cool to like have a mix of some that like the protagonist instantly, and some that you have to like kind of work your way in a little bit. Right?
Yeah, and that specific character went ahead being the antagonistic toward the protagonist, and that specific moment changed her mind, and that felt like, he earned it.
Yeah, it's always nice to, even with a plain protagonist, I shouldn't call him. It's like an average protagonist, and can at least prove himself still, not being completely personalityless, but while still giving you like the decisions of choice of who you want to go out with and all that stuff.
That's a lot about Princess Evangile. On a different note, is there another favorite Moege you have in mind, Ange?
Oh, you're talking about a one that I personally like, or one that I think is like more genre defining?
Actually, that's a good point. I'll let you pick. Which one do you want to talk about?
Yeah. So while we're on the topic of genre defining Moege by the fan base, you can't go wrong or you can't talk about Moege without talking about Ubisoft. And I would say one of the most popular or one of the easiest to get into by Ubisoft is Senran Banka. It was one of their slightly more recent visual novels released by Ubisoft, and I believe it was their first fully in HD. And the reason I bring up this one in particular is because outside it having like a kind of unique setting where like it kind of takes place in kind of like a older Japanese like setting instead of like the modern high school setting. It still has basically every modern anime romance harem trope you could think of. Like I said, it'll have like those moments where the protagonist will walking on a girl naked. It'll have the main heroines having somewhat stereotypical personalities or tropes. Like, for example, one of them is like a very serious kudere hard worker. One is a very Japan likes to make fun of foreigners a lot, and by making them blonde and speaking in English a lot of times with Lena, for example. But then they kind of experiment with like different I guess you can call body types. Like they'll have like their they'll have their lolly, they'll have their girls with like bigger breasts and stuff like that. But they also Ubisoft has a thing where they like to experiment with side routes where basically they have like 4 to 5 main heroines who have like full length romance routes and all that, but then they also have these shorter 1 to 2 hour at most routes where you get to choose between 2 of your childhood friends. And what childhood friends are a very common trope in Moege, because I guess people like that nostalgia with their romantic interests sometimes. But having them as an option is like something that I think is interesting that some Moege companies do over others, and Ubisoft definitely has loved doing that for a long time. Though I would say those 2 childhood friend routes are probably a little bit longer than maybe some others, but I guess going back into maybe Ubisoft and why I think it's like a big genre-defining Moege series and why I'm using Senran Banka. Senran Banka, as you will likely see through these screenshots, has pretty well done production quality. Like when you think of like wish fulfillment, many people think, well, I want pretty good looking girls, right? Well, I think that's like one of the things Ubisoft does excellently, and they put a lot of effort in the presentation, from the girls' designs, from the backgrounds to like their UI. They give you a lot of options. So, and going into the storytelling itself, I mean, it does have some I guess you can call kind of a plot with fighting yokais or something a little bit of supernatural, but for the most part, it's about what you'd expect from a Moege slice of life. A lot of romantic comedy, a lot of romantic build-up. Once you get into their routes, they all have their connections to the whole supernatural thing, but for the most part, they definitely emphasize like the main character, and how he gets closer with the girls and getting to know their different personalities.
I like how you mentioned the art as a big factor. One thing I love about visual novels is that they have so many different aspects to stand out as a whole product. There's, of course, the art, there's the writing, the plot, the UI, any choices, the music. There are all these different factors that borrow from all sorts of other different mediums. But when you have something that's designed to be as cutesy and comforting as a moege, then, of course, probably the art will stand out the most. A company would really want to make their art outstanding in that sense. And like you mentioned, I only have a passing familiarity with Ubisoft titles, but all of their art and the character designs and the CGs involved are gold. Every time I just see some of their screenshots, It's like, oh, that either looks adorable or that looks funny just from the art. And I think that goes a long way in what makes a moege so moe in its own way, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, Ubisoft basically every title, like whenever they for every title they released, it was basically like top of the line moe art for the year that they released in. And while I chose Senran Banka as as the pick for this episode, mostly because I think the heroine quality is actually pretty even. Like no one really sticks out too much over the others, unlike some other titles. But honestly, with Ubisoft, it's one of those just pick one where you like the premise or the girl or a certain girl the most, and as long as you like their comedy style and their romance writing style, you should love at least one of their Ubisoft visual novels or routes or something.
I have an even easier question than Taurus.
Okay.
Really? You had to pick Senran Banka? I was supposed to not know any Moeges, and it's the second one I know of on this episode.
Oh, you've read it?
Although I did not read it, I did bought it on the premiere. I thought the art style was nice, so exactly like Taurus described, that was something gripping. I thought the setting that is interesting. It is with the fantasy element in it, and this is how I like those slice of life stories to be. And again, I heard a lot of good things about the Ubisoft, so I thought, let's buy it and throw into the backlog. Somehow, someday, maybe I'll read it. But it was insta-buy from me.
Okay, I mean, yeah, it is a moege, so you do have, you kind of, I know there's generally probably not a genre you get into as easily, but it's probably what you'd expect it to be, so as long as you're in the mood for it, and definitely give it a shot whenever you feel like it, especially since you bought it already.
Yeah.
On that note, yeah, I have a bunch of VNs I bought on release, and I haven't gotten around to reading it either. We're in the same boat.
I'd like to hope that at the very least I'm supporting the medium I love, even if I buy those that I don't have time to read.
I guess moving on from Ubisoft, Toros was asking me earlier, like, what are some of my favorite moege visual novels, and one that I definitely would love to talk about any day of the week is Making Lovers, developed by SME. Making Lovers, it does have a lot of the typical things you'd expect from a moege slice of life. It's completely lighthearted, pure romance. Unlike the other two the visual novels I've mentioned, there's no supernatural, or it's just pure down-to-earth romance. However, the main thing that I like personally about Making Lovers is it finally graduates from the very typical high school setting we've gone so used to from anime and visual novels, and actually has a mostly adult age slice of life romance aspect to it. So just for reference, the main character and a couple of the heroines are 23 years old, so they can drink, they can get a job, they've already graduated from college, all that good stuff. There's even a heroine that's almost in her 30s, and she isn't a romantic option. I mean, there is a couple of heroines that are still in school, but they definitely do not emphasize the school aspect nearly as much. In fact, the heroines still in school have their own part-time job. So I think it's really cool that they finally implemented a way to have the moege style, but with adult age characters. And surprisingly, I think they cover those aspects pretty well. In each route, the protagonist basically has to get a job, and just so happens that job relates to the heroine of choice. So in one of the routes, for my personal favorite character, Mashiro, the one with the white hair, she works at a seafood restaurant called Leviathan, and part of the route is, in addition to getting closer to Mashiro, he has to kind of work. He's like a server, and so he has to know how getting used to working at a restaurant goes. Like how you take orders, how do you take care of stuff in the back, or cleaning up, and while talking to customers correctly, etc. So I think that stuff is really interesting, and I'm really glad that it got translated a couple years ago and released by Nekonyan. I mean, it helps that Mashiro ended up being one of my current favorite visual novel heroine, just because she kind of has a very unique, quirky type of personality that you just don't really see much in most heroines, and she's just really, really funny. Like she's definitely a jokester, that's for sure. And one more point I want to make. Making Lovers kind of emphasizes one aspect that I think Moege could probably do better, and that's the comedy. Like SME comedy is very, very, I would say, quite a bit different from the usual like harem anime comedy, where it's just like moe tropes, like spanned left and right. Like there's almost no running into the girls naked while they're changing. I mean, sure, there's some like the typical moe stereotypes. Like there is a kind of tsundere as a heroine, but she's not like just like girl Yubaka like every like 30 minutes. Like you actually get it. You kind of see she has a kind of mature, I guess a realistic reason why she acts that way, and she softens up pretty quickly, and it's nice to see that done in a more surprisingly mature way. So basically, I think the blend of like the mature adult aspect to Making Lovers, while also having some really unique, hilarious, kind of savage comedy, is part of why I really like it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I wanted to go back to what you said about routes specifically. Because
okay.
I do remember, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the title that forgoes a common route entirely and you basically choose the story from the get-go?
It doesn't completely forego common route. It's instead the common route is insanely short. So when most people think common routes in like most visual novels, even like the story-based ones, usually at minimum they're like 5 hours, and then there's some that can go as high as like 10 hours if it's like a pretty long VN. But Making Lovers in particular is like, okay, we're not gonna like waste time. Like this isn't like school where like the protagonist can just like run into a heroine like in like less than a minute just by walking around school. Like he kind of has a life to live, so the only way he can beat these heroines is by like going to these jobs or different buildings. So generally you have like 1 to 3 choices before you're locked on to a heroine's route. I would say the most egregious example is there's a very, very early choice where one of the main character's closest male friends like, hey, I want to set you up on a blind date, and you can choose to accept or not. And if you accept, you basically get on that person's route right away, and you have no idea who it is. So you have to be very careful when making choices. Like every choice at the beginning very much matters, because once you're done choosing, there's no more choices. You're in a route.
Because usually when you have common routes, the whole point of it is that you, the reader, can get familiar with the whole cast and all of the romanceable heroines as any side characters as well, and then you can go through some general story beats. But when you have something like Making Lovers, which is, like you said, more mature, and it's out of that whole high school situation, like, isn't the beginning more like a speed dating sort of thing? Or as like you mentioned, there's the blind date, and it's like, okay, you just sets you up with someone and you start dating, and that's it. That's how it sometimes is in the adult world, as opposed to high school, where you spend all day with these cast of characters, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I was thinking about this like around when I read it. It almost feels like Making Lovers kind of caught up with the modern times, and in a weird way, kind of feels closer to what modern dating actually is. not just as simple as, here, I need to know this girl for like, several weeks to months before I finally ask her out. This is kind of more like, oh, I'll meet her like once or twice, and then maybe we'll just give it a shot if we hit it off, and then maybe it'll work. And obviously, since it's a Moege, it does work out. But at the time, these days, it kind of seems like many people just kind of jump into relationships super quickly, especially with stuff like dating apps and stuff. But there's no. I'll just say there's no dating app stuff in Making Lovers. But even if you take that out of account, like it seems like characters hook up really, really quickly. I mean, and it's not like they're instantly in love or anything. They're still kind of giving each other a chance, but there's definitely enough of an attraction to really, oh, you know what? Yeah, let's give this a chance. It kind of feels more realistic in a way in that regard.
Like, oh, there's so many, movies, VNs, all sorts of pieces of media where the story always ends with the confession. And it's like these two characters, and it's the will they or won't they. One of them finally confesses, and the other accepts, and then the credits roll. And it's like now Making Lovers is kind of one of the different aspects where it's instead they start off dating, and you get to see the journey of them as their relationship grows and whatnot. And you can see something beyond that confession, like the actual life they live together as romantic partners. I always appreciate having variety in works of fiction, so something like Making Lovers is very much appreciated in my end.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. One aspect I love about Making Lovers is there's this cool date system. Like after you're going out, like you said, because you go out pretty much almost immediately. So, like right a little after you start going out, after some like comedy skits, you get to you choose like, okay, do I want to take a girl out to a movie or to an arcade or to the bowling out? Oh, actually, not the bowling out, the karaoke, and then what kind of where should we eat at? Should we eat like at the mall? Should we eat at like a restaurant or something like that? I mean, and the fact that they made every single one of those situations have unique dialogue. It's not just half-assed or anything. I thought that's really nice. Every heroine gets their own unique dialogue and humor, and it's really nice. One more Moege I had in mind for this episode is I kind of want to go into the topic of Moege that kind of have, I guess you can say, more plot than the others. And one of the ones that come to my mind is the very popular Aokana 4 Rhythms Across the Blue. So this one, we're going back into high school for this one, and it does have like some of the typical high school tropes, but there does have the main thing that sticks out about Aokana is it features a fictional sport introduced specifically for that visual novel called Flying Circus. Basically, in this universe, for some reason, technology has advanced really quickly where people could just kind of have like these flying shoes, and you can like fly to school essentially, and it's a pretty neat feature. But with those flying shoes comes like a more sports variation where it's kind of like playing flying tag in a way where there's like this there's like a whole section of the game where they explain all the rules, and like basically there's different roles the characters can play. Like some are better at scoring points, some are better at going really fast, etc. And
but the whole thing is about this fictional sport at its center, right?
Essentially, the thing is, the point I was going to get at is how, while it does center around that sport is like the center point of the story, how much it matters in the romance kind of depends on the route. So for example, Mashiro, the token lolly character, I would say she has the least focus on the flying circus sport. Like she has kind of a more traditional romance story where you get to know her and all that stuff, and she has a lot of slice of life. But I mean, it's not like Flying Circus is completely written out. It's just it takes more it has more specific scenes related to like her development towards the end. Meanwhile, with someone like Asuka or Misaki, like almost half their route are about like these flying circus tournaments and like how they have to like get better in order to get better at these tournaments. almost to the point where while they do have like romance themes, it feels like they don't have quite as much time to have like romantic development because they're busy like having the main character help this girl out, get better at the sport. So I guess in a weird way, people still define this as moege since it's still ultimately a light-hearted high school slice of life. But the fact that it incorporates this fictional sport with like some pretty hype shonen, at least, well, my opinion, hype shonen-y moments or stuff with might I add a lot of really good art and CGs. I guess kind of elevates this moege for many people to the point where many people consider it one of the best in the genre.
Oh wow. And so it's getting that you mentioned that it's kind of viewed as one of the better ones, and so perhaps because it contains all of those elements of being a moege along with some of the hype action scenes of being a sportsy shonen kind of title.
Yeah, that at least from when I've read it, that kind of seems to be why, like, while it's not like a top personal favorite of mine, I definitely like it, and I definitely see why many people love it, because yeah, it definitely does its best to like stick out from like a standard pure dating sim one, like just Evangile, like I mentioned, or like in the Da Capo series that was mentioned in the official description of it. So I think despite how like many people say moege is like the safe genre and all that, I do think there are enough kind of, I guess you could call, subgenres of moege kind of like this, where they're not all completely the same. I mean, they're still predictable in the sense that you're most likely not going to have like a sad ending or a bad ending where someone dies or something like that. But there's enough variety to where I think even there's some visual novels like these where it could even appeal to people who don't usually like just the pure dating sim moege, and that there are some that can still have those moege aspects, but while incorporating other things seamlessly so it can stick out on its own.
I heard it has quite world building in it, with all those companies invested in an industry of flying circus and developing different kind of boots to fly for.
Yeah, there's a few aspects related to that. Like there's a few scenes where a few of the characters had to feel like, okay, like which store should we support to like get these shoes that, and how will they fit like this type of person's role? Like, or would you be like a speeder, like a speeder character would probably want to go to this store, buy this type of shoe? Like they actually go into a surprising amount of detail now that I think about it, and you even get to that reminds me, there's rival schools as a part of this, so there's not just like one school like in most moege that matters. Like for example, one of the main heroines, Rika, is actually from a rival school, but she just has the fortunate advantage of being a newer next door neighbor of the main protagonist, so that's how they keep in contact. But at the end of the day, she still rivals with like the other girls in his flying circus club. So it's interesting to see like how the main character's school and his club mates kind of interact and compete against other schools, and like seeing all that, MR said, like the world building around the sports and the tournaments and the school. Like this writer put a lot of effort into making sure it's incorporated well and has interesting amount of depth to possibly to the going to the wish fulfillment aspect of, man, what if I were to like live in a world that had flying circus? Like, would I just be like a regular person who just flew around to go to school, or would I want to like take part of the sport? It's part of the intrigue about it, I would say.
And on a topic of wish fulfillment, I would like to wish everybody Happy New Year, because this episode comes to a close. So I hope everybody's New Year's resolution comes true, and I guess mine would be to try some moega in the new year.
Same here. I will perhaps check out some of them, especially since I've listened to Ange's recommendations in the past, so I trust him on some of these topics here. And a huge thank you again to Ange for coming by to record for our episode this week and for helping us so much about a topic that MR and I are both pretty unfamiliar with. So thank you so much again, Ange.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Moege is definitely one of my favorite genres, and I'm definitely happy to talk about it. And yeah, like they said, like Tor said, I'm happy to give out recommendations. Like I only talked about 4. I could easily go on and on about many, but yeah, I'll leave it at that. And like Sim, I would definitely hope everybody who's listening has a happy new year. And like MR said, hopefully this episode can inspire you to try out more Moege. You can definitely reach out to me on YouTube or Twitter if you want some recommendations.
Thank you and bye-bye.